So as we mentioned, this is part two of the webinar on how to put on a major event on your campus. So to start off, kind of a recap of what we went through in part one, as well as looking forward to what we can expect in the second part. In part one, we covered what are those kind of important factors as you are starting to plan those events on your campus. Things like the date of the event, the genre or type of act you're looking to bring in, the venue, and your budget for the event. We discussed some different ways that you can research artists and options to bring for your event with things like pricing sheets, as well as using data like ticket sales, streaming metrics on various streaming platforms, and things like that. We talked about what a middle agent is and what we can offer you. It should be no surprise to anybody, but we at Degy are middle agents, and there are a couple others in the college market that are also working in that same capacity as a middle agent. And finally, we showed you what goes into what that formal offer letter looks like when you are ready to make an offer to an artist to perform, going through all of those various deal points that we like to put on that offer sheet so that those artists have as much information as we can possibly give them to make the best informed decision they can if they want to perform at your event or not. At the end of part one, we wrapped up with finally getting an artist locked in and confirmed to perform. So in part two, we're going to be discussing that contracting process, what that paperwork situation looks like for these major events, getting your marketing plan put together and approved by the artist so you're able to market and get the word out about your show. What is advancing and what does that look like? We'll go into kind of what that process is, as well as some best practices for the day of the event, so everybody is as successful as possible when they're hosting these major concerts or comedy shows on their campuses. So here's kind of a little flow chart. We covered this in part one, that just kind of walks you through those different steps that I just laid out. First off, we start deciding those four main factors. We research those artists, put together that list of top artist choices. Once we have that list narrowed down and you have that top choice, we prepare that offer and get it submitted to the artist. That artist may negotiate back and forth like we talked about in part one. And if they end up passing on that offer, you may need to go back to the drawing board, pick another artist off of that list and submit another offer. Like I mentioned, we're picking up today with, hey, we've gotten an artist confirmed. Yay, what comes next? As I was just mentioning, obviously contracting and paperwork is the big one, so we like to jump on that first thing after we get that artist locked in, developing that marketing plan and putting those marketing materials together, advancing those details with both the artist team and your production team, those kind of final week of prep items that some people tend to forget about that are always kind of cut down to the last minute, and then finally show day. So I'm going to hand it over to Jeff. And we're going to talk about, hey, we've gotten it accepted. Let's jump into contracting.
That's right. Absolutely. Just a little bit of a recap. Obviously, once your offer is accepted, this is still, a time where things could be negotiated. They may come back with another request. Your contracts aren't done. There might be a stumbling point on the contract. So you don't want to really go all out and just blast it to the world. Hey, we've got Flo Rida. Don't post the good news on social media just yet, but you can share it internally, right? You can share it with the people that need to know, the ones that are working on this show with you, the ones that have the permission to know. Don't be a spoiler. There was a time where a whole program board came up to me in the booth and there was only two of them that knew. And I said, oh my gosh, are you excited to have this artist? And unfortunately, the rest of them didn't know, so now I know to only share it with the specific people that have permission to know that. And just know that the hard work is just starting. There's a lot that goes into this, and it begins with really collecting a lot of the things that your school requires and that the artist requires, and that just are general industry requirements to have shows, or just realistic requirements like contracting, right? We want to make sure that we talk about the contracting because there are agreements that have fallen apart from the offer stage through the contracting stage because you couldn't agree to terms that are in contracting language. Now, most of the time, at the very least, you can get your lawyers on the phone with their lawyers and everybody can kind of come up with the fact that, you know what, you're saying the same thing. We just have to work on words. And a lot of times it's either they want you to cover it or you want them to cover it, but you don't want each other to be covered. And so then it ends up being nobody's covered. And those are things that we talk about here in this contracting phase. Like, marking up the contracts and riders, making sure that you have your legal affairs and your risk management people on speed dial, that they are the ones really, they're paid and hired by the university to do this. So there are some people that are in activities and student affairs who are that person that is the key contract editor. You want to make sure that if you are that person, that you are getting the help that you need from the folks at your school, any advisement, any risk management, working on making sure that you know what those processes are, those addendums that you may have to add, and any school paperwork that you may need to have them do. So any vendor payment forms in order for them to get their check, or if you need a W-9 or a COI, means certificate of insurance, if you need that to either create the contract or write the check, then you've got to let them know that and collect that from them right up front. All right. And then there is not a problem with going through contracts and redlining things. These are examples of what happened after we took, our clients got a hold of these riders, and the contract is on my left and the rider is on my right here. You can see all the red and all the blue. They go back and forth. Now, the reason we put this on here really small isn't just to point out clauses as to what you can do, but it's to point out that there's a lot of back and forth, and you can track all of the back and forth with red lines and this language added so that everyone can clearly see what the edited contracts are. There are some schools that are asking to have clean copies or Word documents. That's not an industry standard process. So you really want to make sure that if that is the case and that those are situations that you're going to run into, that you're letting everyone know up front so that everyone can go into this with eyes wide open and in that scenario. So please communicate those things. Those edits on the left and on the right, you can go to that one. I was gonna melt right into it, man. That's all good. We've got the rider here on the right for Sway Lee, and this is just an example, just to prove that most of the artists are giving us a standard rider. It's not specifically tailored for your show. It's not specifically tailored for a college. These are sometimes even big arena riders that you have to pare down, and you have to cross out those red line things like the tequila and the Hennessy and the juices that go with it. And if they would like those specific juices to come back in, then that can be handled in the advance process. But a lot of this stuff, when you're dealing with these contracts, you're going to need to redline a lot of these things for public institutions, anything like that, where these contracts could be requested. You want to make sure that all of that is crossed out and that there's no question that you are not providing that. Okay. So that's just a next step, kind of an example of what's on there. And then I'm going to pass that on to Sophie to kind of pick it up from there after that.
Awesome. So next, once we have an artist confirmed, we kind of want to figure out a really strong plan as far as how we're going to announce that the show is happening and when that's going to take place, how it's going to take place. And really having some good deadlines here is going to help you be successful in the long run, especially because with your marketing assets, you're going to want to give yourself enough time to have edits on those. If the artist team were to have any changes once you do submit those for approval. So making sure that you have deadlines as far as, if you have specific team members who are going to be responsible for specific videos or graphics. And then also just having a plan in general for when this is going to be announced. So can you get creative with any bigger, large attended events that are happening soon or before your event, at least, where you can kind of be in front of your audience that you want to at least either buy tickets or sign up to come or mark their calendar. So how can you get creative with announcing? And again, just like leaving yourself enough time and having those deadlines so that you're on pace for the right amount of time to sell tickets or get the word out in general. So then we'll have the announced date and the on sale date. And then with that, then also comes the larger marketing plan. So making sure that you have a plan in general for your whole team to reference. This includes not only the marketing assets, but anything that you're going to be posting on social media. Are you promoting in other ways on campus through radio advertising? Are you printing posters, and where are those going to be put on campus or in the community? And then again, if you have any specific artist requests for the artist to create for you to then use, they're not a requirement of the artist, but they're a request. So in that marketing plan that you're going to submit for approval, you can put any of those requests that you might have. Like if you want any specific shout out videos for them to make about the show and like when they're going to be on campus. Perfect. So this is kind of an example marketing plan that we wanted to give you guys a chance to peek at. This one's really in depth, so we like to use this one as an example because it definitely covers all the details. On the first side right here, you can see all the details about the event that we're providing to the artist team, so they know exactly what this marketing plan is referring to, the time, where the show is taking place, who they can contact if they were to have any changes, and then who's also just creating these in general. And then on the right, we are starting with print advertising. So where are we going to use these marketing assets? Where are they going to be placed? And then digital advertising, when we're going to post on social media, what handles they're going to be posted from so that they can also check those out and maybe even share them when they see them go out as well. And then in this example specifically, there's certain screens across campus that they're planning on putting up the advertising on. So we'll go to the next page and actually see those requests. So again, these aren't a requirement of the artist, but you kind of want to ask for your most ideal scenario up front so that they can maybe provide at least one of these, if not all of them, but definitely asking for what your most ideal scenario is going to be for the artist to be involved in that marketing process. And then with the specific video requests in this example, they used actual timestamps to show the actual parts of those videos that they wanted to incorporate in their marketing videos. So that makes it even easier on the artist team so that they can go in, check what you're looking at, and either give a thumbs up or thumbs down right away. And then here's the poster that they came up with. There's a time for doors, so maybe that's just another, I guess, tip. Maybe not posting like set times on the posters so that you're not having people show up late just for the headliner. But in this example, they did just put the door time so that people know when they can get into the venue. They have a really great logo here, and they said they're going to be printing this on stickers as well. So showing how that logo is going to be used in different designs. And then a marketing calendar right here also that's color coded so they know exactly like what kind of marketing is going out and when. So keeps you really organized and makes sure everybody's on track for getting things where they need to go to be as successful as possible, and for the artist team to be able to see exactly what's going to be happening as well. Awesome. And then I think Sean is going to jump in right here with advancing details.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to throw a quick poll question out, not with an actual poll, but just if you want to drop answers in the chat or raise your hand. Does anybody know what the term advancing means? Anyone? Oh, I see one in the chat. Let's see. We got a yes. So for those that might not know, advancing is basically just a fancy term for everybody's talking to each other. The advance process is really where we iron out all of the nitty-gritty details about the event. So on this first slide here, we're talking about advancing with the production team and really hiring that production company. So with this, obviously, to put on a concert, you need sound, you need a stage, you need lighting equipment. So this is where you can go through that rider with your production team and go through what those requirements are from the artist. You'll want to look at, are we doing it indoor versus outdoor like we talked about in part one, because an outdoor event has some different challenges with your production. Some schools do have a permanently built stage outdoors on their campus. Other schools may need to build a stage outside, or you may be bringing in a mobile stage, which basically comes in as a stage on a semi-truck that just unfolds, and then you've got a mostly built stage ready to go. With that production advance, you'll also want to figure out, what does our barricade situation look like? And we'll touch on this a little bit later, but we want to make sure that we have barricades so that we're keeping everybody in attendance at the event physically safe. Some schools do need to go through an RFP process where they're putting out a request for multiple production companies to submit quotes to address what they need for the event, and then they'll go through and choose a production company based on those quotes. I know at least we here at Degy do offer some help with that process if you do need help. We have an incredible operations team that helps you out through this entire process after confirmation. So our operations team is there to help you side by side throughout the rest of this process. And also, we talked about budget in the first part of the webinar, but that production equipment also is usually about the second biggest part of your budget, if not the biggest, depending on what artist we land on. So you definitely want to make sure that you've got enough room in your budget to hit all of the production needs for the event. Continuing with production, some of the kind of back of house things that we talk about that also goes in, again, touching on the budget, but also that we get coordinated during this advanced process are the hospitality items, like Jeff showed with the rider. Obviously, some of it gets cut out, like the alcohol and any of those other extraneous things, but usually at least some light snacks are appreciated in the green room. So we want to make sure that we're cutting down the rider and we all know and we're all on the same page of what are those items that are 100% necessary for the artist versus what are those things that we can cut out. Some schools are able to provide transportation for the artist, most schools are not. But with transportation, we at least like to know if the artist is flying in for your event, what are their flight details? What time do they land? Are they flying in the day of, the night before? What does that look like? So we're aware and can track in case of any flight delays because of weather or other issues. We'll advance what the merchandise situation looks like. Is the artist bringing merch to sell? Are they not? If they are bringing it, are they bringing it with them? Are they shipping it to you ahead of time? That all gets covered in this advanced process. We finalize that day of show schedule with the production team and the artist teams to make sure we're all on the same page about what time are sound checks, what time do doors open, what rough times are everybody's sets at, so that we can make sure we're all staying on schedule for the day, and creating credentials for the day of the event. We'll talk a little bit more in depth about credentials later, but these just say, yes, I'm who I am and I'm where I'm supposed to be. I'm allowed to be backstage at this event, and you're stopping anybody who's not supposed to be back there from somehow finding their way backstage. Diving a little bit more into the hospitality side of things, like we mentioned, that hospitality rider does get cut down a little bit throughout the advanced process, but there are going to be some things that you do need to shop for. Usually, I recommend to my schools shop for most of it a day or two before the show. It's always very stressful if you're running out the morning of the event to go shop for the entire hospitality rider. So anything that can be bought in advance should be, just to keep things easy. Bags of chips and things aren't going to go stale in the couple days beforehand if you buy it a couple days early. But also talking about hospitality, we want to make sure that the artists are getting their full meals that they need. If they're on site at your show starting at 9 a.m., we really should be feeding them both lunch and dinner. If they're showing up even earlier, say at like 6 a.m., because they have that much equipment they need, you may also need to feed them breakfast because they're on site for so long. So we'll work with your team and the artist team to go through any food allergies or dietary preferences as well, to make sure that if we are catering meals, we are addressing each of those dietary needs to make sure everybody can eat at the show. And then lastly on this slide, water, water, water. I say that for all of my schools that I work with, you can never have too many bottles of water at an event. A bottle of water isn't going to go bad, so if you have too much at one event, save it for your next event and hold on to it. Everybody's going to appreciate having plenty of water available throughout the day. Obviously, everybody's putting in a lot of work in the venue the day of. Your production team's moving lots of heavy equipment around, so just make sure you have plenty of water to keep everybody involved super hydrated. Another part of this advancing process, more important for outdoor shows, is developing that weather plan, but whether it's indoors or outdoors, we also want to work on a security plan. So some things that can change for an indoor versus outdoor weather plan. Obviously, you want to be keeping an eye on the weather ahead of time. As we mentioned in part one of the webinar, if you are planning an outdoor event, make sure you have an indoor venue as a backup option, just in case you do need to make that pivot a couple days beforehand as you're watching the weather. Also, make sure you coordinate with that production team, because that can look different for them. Their load in and load out process looks very different for an outdoor show versus an indoor show. So you want to make sure you're communicating that with your production team as much as you possibly can. And they'll actually also help you guide and make that decision based on what their equipment can handle. If it's going to be light rain, you may be able to still move forward with the show. But if it's going to be a thunderstorm or a tornado or any big snowstorm or things like that, you want to make sure you have that indoor option as a backup just in case you need to pivot. as well as having some contingency plans built into the schedule. If you have to make that decision day of, having the flexibility in your schedule for the day to push things back if needed in case of weather. And you want to make sure you're communicating that plan to your production team as well as your security team, your campus police, campus administration, whoever's involved in kind of the logistics of that event should all be on the same page about what that plan looks like. And then on the security plan, we put together something that we call a dot map. This is what shows the placement of the security within the venue, and this helps smooth everything out day of, make sure everybody knows exactly where they're supposed to be stationed during the event, and make sure there's no gaps in the barricade where somebody might be able to slip up either onto the stage or into the backstage area, where the artist might get uncomfortable with that extra person being there. As you see, everything on here all goes into the weather plan. Things like evacuation routes, shelter if we're outside, and shelter for inclement weather, running emergency drills, making sure the venue's accessible. All of this goes into putting those weather and security plans together. One of the big things that we always kind of run into as well is who's making those announcements in case we do need to pivot once the doors are open for the event. Is that your middle agent going on stage? Is it somebody from the production team? Is it the advisor from your team going on stage? But knowing who's responsible for making those announcements and even having rough scripts just in case as a contingency in case you need to make announcements like those. And now I'm going to pass it over to Sophie, and she'll talk a little bit about what our advanced sheet looks like.
Perfect. Thanks, Sean. So this is an example of one of our advanced sheets. It's empty, but this is kind of a document that once you do confirm an artist, you're going to start loading in all this information from the start of your advance all the way up until the day of show. So sometimes you might have answers really quickly on information that goes in here, and then sometimes we're finding out details even up until the day prior about the show that is going to get loaded in here. But page 1 is really dedicated to where the event is taking place and all of the players who are going to be on site or who are involved from the artist team so that you can get answers from the right people. So there's spots for the artist contacts, the tour manager, the production manager, if they're selling merch and they have someone coming on site to sell merch, what their contact is, and then if they have security personnel coming. And then, of course, it's color-coded so that if you do have multiple different artists, it's color-coded accordingly. Page 2 we can go to. So this is going to be even more details about the event. The green room, where is the green room located? What is available in the green room? Is there Wi-Fi available? Is there a fitness facility? So this is really where the artist team can go to get a lot of quick answers about the show without necessarily needing to reach out and wait for a response from someone. And then also you on the day of show, it's a quick reminder for you if you've already kind of figured out the answers to all of these to be able to give quick answers to the artist team when they're on site as well. Something like that you might not be so obvious to think about is how is the artist getting to the show, especially with all the weather that could potentially impact travel, and just knowing like how they're scheduled to get there and if you do need to be able to pivot, but so that you're able to track that on the day of show as well. So what their flights look like, or if they are driving and now all of a sudden there's something that's going to potentially interrupt that, being able to track that and have a plan is good as well. So we put that travel information down there as well. Going on to the third page is where that day of show schedule is going to live, as well as the production details. So who's providing backline? Is there a backdrop? Is there a video wall? So a lot of things that an artist production team might have questions about the show, that's going to live on this page for them to be able to reference. As well as you can see we put the capacity of the venue, the size of the stage, and then any like specific notes to remind the artist of would go here. So if it's the name of your event, or maybe reminding them that this is a family-friendly show and there's a certain language policy, that would be good to put here next to the schedule in that notes section. So really just another opportunity for any last-minute reminders for them to know that might be important. And then Jeff's going to talk a little bit about barricades. I'll let him jump in there.
That's right. You give me the talk about keeping people safe, and I'm happy about it. All right. We've got a couple of different types of barricade. When people say that they want barricade in front of your stage, what they're really hoping that you're going to do is the concert barricade on the left-hand side. What a lot of people do is the bike rack on the right-hand side. Unfortunately, the bike rack on the right-hand side, it's not very stable, can be pushed over pretty easily. Ankles, feet, arms, hands, all that stuff can get caught in between there, and it causes a lot more injuries than it's really, much safer to keep it out of the front of the concert venue where people want to access the stage. When you have a lot of people, they're pushing this concert barricade on the left. The brand name is called Mojo. It's really a blow through barricade that is designed to collapse at a certain weight to actually alleviate that crush policy that happens when people surge. So you're all familiar with Astroworld. We definitely know what happened there. That was a failure back in the further back. But this is built to prevent things like that by crashing over, by folding over. Ari and I have seen that happen live. First week I worked here, actually. But this is what we recommend for people, and it does cost a little bit extra, but it's really worth it. And you really only need the width of the stage to really kind of the outside of the subs, really where that main focus of people that want to be as close as possible to that stage and that artist. And then from then on out, you definitely want to protect your backstage area. There you can use your bike rack. You can use your bike rack to protect your front of house mix position. You can use it for entry and exit points and egress and exit and exits throughout, kind of channeling people. Make sure that if you are putting this in an area where it would be in front of an exit or egress way, that it's not connected, or that you are not blocking the area that is large enough for the amount of people. Fire marshal's going to come through there, tell you I'll take it all down. There are times where you can't go all the way to the wall, so you've got to make sure that you have people to barricade back to your backstage, and that's all going to become, all fire code dependent. We can definitely go to that next one. Another way of keeping people out of your backstage area, other than, ringing it with bike rack, is to make credentials for folks. And a lot of people are like, oh, well, we know everybody here. They have their name tags, etc. Well, you aren't going to necessarily, or your security isn't going to necessarily know the artist. You may have photographers coming in from outside. You may have other folks that are VIP, or maybe you've hired labor and you have working, and you don't want them walking all around the buildings at night. So you want to make sure that you have people that have proper credentials. And in order to do that, you've got to make sure that the people that are charged with keeping people out of those spaces are aware of what those credentials are and mean. So we've given you kind of a credential board here. This is the different credentials. You can explain what they are. There's by the way, not everyone needs all access, right? You want to keep that just because everyone's on the program board. It's their concert. We get it. That's 100% okay. But there's limited access because that artist is going to need that privacy, that there's that space to work. So the people that need to be back there should have that access. You can do various levels of access and really give people like different access points. So you need to get back here for hospitality, so you have all access. But if you're just, outside front of house, we'll get you at the meet and greet. So there's a lot of that type of thing that goes around, where you need to make sure you aren't giving your entire program board or your entire student body all access to the artists. If you are walking them to a stage and you're walking from, over a long space. We used to have come out of a building, walk across the grass, got to get to the stage. Make sure you're trying to at least have some sort of security or access, and checking that access with passes on the way in and the way out of that. Making these credential sheets ahead of time and posting them in the areas, because you're also hiring a lot of security companies of people that have never worked there before. So that you want to communicate, and if somebody walks up to them and says, hey, I've got this colored credential, they're going to go, well, I don't know what that means. Even though it may say media, it may say security on there, or all access, you need to have a sheet or a board that explains what these things are, so that all of your security, and that they're posted at those security points so that the security people know who to let by. All right,
Yeah, and
next
I'm
one.
going to jump in with one quick handy
Yeah.
tip that I always recommend is as they are shown on the slides, try and color code them to make them as easy as possible to differentiate. If they're all the same color and the only differentiating factor is that label on it, it can be a lot harder to quickly tell the difference in the dark once the show has started.
100% right. Yeah, everybody, if the words are going to be different, but the picture is going to be the same, make sure that the words are big and stand out, right? I mean, if we understand cost and design definitely, but if you can make those words pop out, like Sean said, sometimes you even have to have a secondary uh, wristband and a credential to get back there, something like that. So there might be some things that you can do in that respect. The next slide that we're going to talk about is also where people can go and how they know what they can bring and how they are, and you're letting people know. At Degy, we provide a show kit. It's called the Degy Show Kit. I know, unique. But what happens in that show kit is we have examples of those credential boards. We have examples of these signage items that you can print out and use and blow up to any size, because communication for people is key. You have to make sure people know that they aren't allowed in certain areas, that they are going to be searched, that they can't bring in bags, or they can't bring in skateboards, or they can't bring in flags or sticks or rods or bars or animals except for service animals. No cameras, because people will show up with their professional camera because they live on campus. It's right there. So why not bring it over to the show and get some footage? But they need to know that it's not allowed, right? And if you do this ahead of time, you have signs all around. Also, the health reasons, the haze and occasional strobe lighting that can affect some people with seizure related illnesses. So you want to make sure that you're aware of that. You're letting people know what's going to be happening there. And if that's something that they need to be aware of themselves, then you're at least giving that notice to them and putting it out there. So we've tried to provide you with a lot of signage, a lot of things you can put out to help communicate with your audience and tell them, it kind of helps everybody instruct how to have a great time. I'm going to throw this back to, I think I'm going back to Sophie, right?
Yeah.
All right, let's get the
Great.
next one.
So we're going to talk about the on-site tour manager meeting. This is, of course, happening on day of show. And really, this is your chance to kind of make a first impression with the artist team when they get on site. You, of course, want to keep them happy and we want them to have a good experience while they're there on campus. So being able to sit down with the tour manager when they first get there and kind of give them a full overview of the day and giving them that reassurance that you're prepared for every scenario and you have all the information they might want, or if you don't, then you can get the information from the right person, is going to be really important in giving them that confidence in the show and that they're going to have a great experience. So for that first kind of portion, it's mainly focused on security aspects. So going over the credential sheet with the artist team, asking them if they have specific credentials that they might be traveling with as well that they plan on using within their crew, and if they can share those to you. If you have a crowd surfing policy, when your security meeting is taking place, and if the tour manager wants to be involved with that, letting them know where it's going to be taking place as well. And then also talking through your emergency plan for different emergency scenarios. Of course, nobody wants to be in a worst case scenario position, but it's really important to be prepared so that you can keep everybody safe and handle accordingly. And then bus security. So if the artist is parked on site, making sure you're allocating security there for their bus so that they can safely get in and out of the venue. And then we move on to kind of the second portion. Is there a meet and greet taking place, and where and when is that going to be? Kind of reassuring the artist team that, we have a photographer and we're going to get you in and out of there and we're not going to be holding you for a really long time. And just so that they don't have any nerves around that. Do they have any people coming as far as any guest list people? What are their names and what's that process going to be as far as where they're allowed and how they're going to get in the venue? Are they selling merch, and who's that person to count in and count out if there's a merch split? So if you are due to get a percentage of the sales, making sure that they know who they need to talk to at the beginning and end of the night to make sure you're getting your split accordingly. Reminding of the alcohol and language policies, if there are language policies, who the approved media is. So saying, we have 2 photographers, and then just going over the photo video policy again so that you guys are on the same page on the day of show, even though you likely have already discussed this leading up to the event. And then any other just kind of specific details about the day, if you have anybody going on stage to make any announcements about any other upcoming events that you're having, that's a really great opportunity, to market the other events that you're hosting to the people who are there. So just giving them a heads up if somebody is going to be on stage ahead of the artist. And then if there's going to be any giveaways that are going to be thrown or given out to people, just discussing that as well. And then food and beverage. So just giving them another, reminder that, hey, yep, beverages are going to be poured. We're taking care of you today. So giving them that reassurance in that meeting and kind of letting them know, hey, I'm your point. Come to me if you have any problems, and we're going to give you a great experience. And then secondly, the security meeting is going to be a separate meeting that happens. And I think Sean is going to talk about the security meeting for us.
Yeah, so as Sophie mentioned, this is another meeting that happens the day of the event. We recommend having the security meeting about an hour before the doors open, so you're making sure that everybody involved in the event is on the same page before you let in your attendees for the event. As Sophie mentioned, we always invite the tour managers to be part of this meeting if they would like. Again, just making sure that everybody in the venue is on the same page before we officially open for the attendees. So to go through some of these bullet points and what goes on in this security meeting, we always point out, hey, here are the couple key point people that are in charge of everything for the day, whether that's the advisor. We'll point out the chief or whoever the captain of the security team is. We'll point out the artist's tour manager or tour managers if they're involved in that meeting, just so everybody gets familiar with faces and can know who they can go to if they have any issues. We'll point out the medical location if we do have an on-site medical team. Normally that is recommended, but if we do have a team, we'll point out where that team is going to be stationed so that the entire security team knows if there's anybody having any sort of medical episode or medical issue during the event, here's where we can take them, or if we need to go get the medical team to come to that person, this is where they're going to be. We'll also point out where that emergency meeting location is in case of any inclement weather or other security issue that we may need to address. We want to make sure that we have a specific spot where everybody who's in that decision-making role will meet, talk about what the issue is, and come to a decision on what the process moving forward is. Hopefully you've already had some of those discussions in that advancing process like we talked about a little bit earlier, but just want to make sure that everybody's on the same page of where to go in case of any sort of active security or safety issue for people. We'll talk about placement of security throughout the venue. I mentioned that dot map earlier. It's basically just a floor plan of the entire venue with little dots where you want your security folks stationed. We always want to make sure that we have security folks in that barricade area in front of the stage to make sure that nobody's trying to hop the barricade, get up on the stage, cause any issues with the artist. So those are typically some of the more important spots, but we'll also want to point out if we need any security backstage at all to help guard any doors backstage, as well as placement around in the house or in the audience. So we've got good coverage throughout the venue to make sure that everybody's staying safe. For those security people that are placed in that barricade, we want to make sure everybody's properly trained on how to properly catch someone if somebody's crowd surfing and happens to come over. We want to make sure that nobody's getting hurt if they somehow either intentionally or unintentionally ends up on the wrong side of the barricade. We don't want anybody getting injured in that process. We want to make sure those security folks know what the proper procedure is to help catch them safely and make sure nobody gets hurt. As well as, like Sophie mentioned, with the tour manager meeting, what is that crowd surfing policy? Are we putting an X on their hands? Are we kicking them out the first time it happens? And like we mentioned, that's usually decided on ahead of time, and this is where you communicate that to everybody on the security team to make sure we're all on the same page. We also want to remind any student volunteers, or if you have university faculty that are helping out, they typically are not the ones trained to deal with any sort of physical altercation that may happen. So we want to make sure that it's only the security team or maybe campus police are the ones that are diffusing those more serious situations, as they're the ones that are actually trained to do that. We don't want your students being the ones getting in the middle of any issues and then getting themselves hurt, getting in trouble for anything like that. We want to make sure that water is brought to everybody that's working, because typically the security people can't easily leave their station quickly during the event. They need to find somebody to fill in their spot while they quickly leave. So it doesn't hurt to have maybe a volunteer from your student team be the designated water person. Make sure they're bringing water to the security team, your production team, and make sure everybody's staying hydrated. Some other things we talk about in the security meeting, we'll go through, after the show, based on however the artist arrived, do we need to reallocate any security team members to be backstage at that exit point where the artist is going to end up leaving the venue? If the artist Ubered to the venue and they don't have their own car there, typically not as big of an issue. But if you have an artist that happens to be on tour and shows up with their whole tour bus, that's a pretty obvious target for students to rush to after the show because they can pretty easily guess that that belongs to that artist. So we want to make sure that we're aware of that and can allocate security over to that bus if needed, just to make sure the artist can get out of the venue safely without getting mobbed by your students after the show. With that security team, if the meet and greet is happening after that security meeting, we'll go over that meet and greet procedure with the security team so they're aware. Typically, if it's happening after the doors are open, that meet and greet happens backstage somewhere. So we want to make sure the security team knows, hey, here's who the people are that are coming to that meet and greet. They've got credentials. They know who they are. They know where they're supposed to be. And we've made sure that that process has been communicated. As well as reminding the security team about any credentials, what those look like. Like Jeff mentioned, having that credential board of here's what all of the designs are, here's bullet points or a list of everywhere in the venue that specific credential type is allowed to go. Make sure everybody's on the same page about what those credentials are and what they look like. We'll remind the security team of what that photo video policy is that we confirmed earlier in the day with the artist team during that tour manager meeting. The typical, pretty standard one is for the first 3 songs of an artist's set with no flash. So that's pretty standard, or if it's different, we'll communicate that with the security team. And with that, we also want to make sure that there's either a security person designated, or usually it's better if it's somebody from the school's team that's kind of the designated, I like to call them the media handler, which is the person that's kind of keeping track of those 3 songs and is there ready in the barricade to pull those photographers out of the barricade area after those first 3 songs to make sure that we comply with that media policy. We also talk about that re-entry policy, if students and attendees are allowed to re-enter the venue or not, and if they are not allowed to re-enter the venue, how are we tracking that and enforcing that, or if they are, what does that process look like? And then finally, for those security members that are in that barricade area, they are typically a very, very short distance from the speakers. So make sure we have earplugs handy just in case those security people didn't bring their own earplugs. We want to make sure they're not damaging their hearing by standing super close to the speakers. That's just a nice quality of life thing for those security members, and they'll definitely appreciate it if you have some earplugs handy. And I'm going to pass it back to Jeff to wrap us up.
All right. Well, thanks, everyone. That was our presentation on what to do after the event is confirmed. So that was part 2. Appreciate your coming, and we want to make sure that everyone knows we do offer internships to the students. If you want to pass that on, if anybody's interested in doing this for a living, we're happy to help. We do a lot of other markets besides the college market, so it does give people a good perspective of what we do. We're also going to incorporate or introduce a webinar series. So if you or anyone you know want to do a webinar with us for your peers, for the college market, or for any other market there, for that matter, please let us know. Reach out to us. We'll make sure that we schedule things. Keep an eye out on the social media and email for the next event that we're going to do in the webinar series. As always, if you'd like us to do this at your school for your event, for your board, we're happy to do that and happy to come in and spend as much time with you as you like to do that presentation for you. Like to thank Sophie and Sean for putting this on. And if there are any questions, you can either drop them into the chat or you can raise your hand and Sean will give you time to chat.
Again, wow, we must have done just such a good job that there are no questions.
We do a wonderful job. All right. Well, if there are No questions. I think what we will do is we'll bring everyone onto the screen. What we'll normally do is have everyone take their cameras off, come on screen and do a quick wave for us. Is that while we take a
I'm just
screenshot?
gonna work on removing our spotlights
Okay,
here if I can do
great,
that.
nice. I
There we
love it.
go. Awesome. So if you feel comfortable and want to come off camera, that's great. We'll go do a little count in for us once everybody seems like they're kind of settled. All right, seems like that may be everybody. All right. All right, ready? 1, 2, 3. Awesome. Oh, Jordan, do you have a question? Or is
No,
that the auto?
the auto hand.
That was the auto Zoom raising your hand. Awesome. Well, I'm going to stop the recording here. Once again, thank you everybody for coming. If you do have a question, we'll stick around for another couple minutes. But if not, thank you all so much. Have a good rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone.